Be like, wait, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I think we all kind of associate that with like being new to a job early in your career. This deep dive, though, is so interesting. You sent over this excerpt, Imposter Syndrome, feeling like a fraud after years of success. You're not alone.
Right.
And it really got me thinking because turns out feeling like an imposter, it's not just for beginners.
It's almost ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, we picture the person, fresh out of school, grappling with imposter syndrome. But this article makes the point that being a seasoned professional, that adds a whole other dimension to it.
It's almost like you should have it figured out by now.
Right.
And the longer you're in the field, it's like the more everyone expects you to be the go-to person, right?
Theoretically, yeah.
But then you sent over this stat from this article, and it says that from Harvard Business Review, 82% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point.
Wow.
82%. Like, are we really all in on this together and nobody's talking about it?
It's not just you, that's for sure, yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways here. It's like imposter syndrome, it isn't this rare anomaly, it's incredibly common.
Right.
And what's more, and this is where the article really digs in, it can actually hit experienced professionals even harder.
Oh, wow, okay.
And think about it, because the longer you're in a field, the higher those expectations rise.
Totally, and the pressure builds. It's
Yeah.
like everyone just expects you to know all the answers just because you've been around longer, and you kind of just want to be like, wow, I wasn't born knowing this.
Right.
Yeah, it's like you're expected to be an expert on day one, but...
And it's not even just the pressure to have the answers, it's that the article really brilliantly, I think, points out that in a rapidly evolving world,
Oh, interesting.
sometimes experience can almost feel like a liability rather than an asset.
Wow.
Think about that, and this stat always gets me. That statistic from the World Economic Forum, what was it? Like, half of all employees will need reskilling by 2025.
Yeah, crazy.
So now put yourself in the shoes of someone who's been a top performer in their field for, say, 2 decades.
Right.
Suddenly, they're in a position where they're playing catch-up, potentially comparing themselves to their younger, maybe more digitally fluent colleagues.
Yeah.
You can talk about a breeding ground for imposter feelings,
Okay,
right?
yeah, it's like the rug gets pulled out from under you.
Yeah.
You're a pro, you've seen it all, and then bam, everything changes, and you're back to feeling like you're faking it till you make it.
And it's not even just on the tech side of things. Even just moving into leadership or new roles in a company, this article points out that that can trigger those imposter feelings regardless of background.
Interesting.
So say you have a seasoned manager,
Yeah.
and they take on a new leadership position in a totally different department.
Okay.
New team, new dynamics, new expectations. Suddenly, they're the novice again, right? Navigating unfamiliar territory.
It's like you're back to square one, even if you have like years of experience under your belt.
Right.
It's like all those old insecurities come rushing back.
Exactly.
Can I handle this? Are they going to realize I'm in over my head? And it's not just a fleeting feeling either. Like, this article doesn't sugarcoat it.
No.
It talks about the impact.
This is where we have to move the conversation from, oh, this is just a mild inconvenience, to like, this is a serious issue.
Right.
Because the article explicitly links imposter syndrome to things like anxiety, chronic stress, burnout.
Wow.
And get this, the American Institute of Stress, they point to a direct link between imposter syndrome and financial losses for companies
What?
due to decreased productivity.
Wow. So this is impacting, like, this is hitting the bottom line for businesses too.
This is a real cost here.
This isn't just like, oh, I feel a little nervous sometimes. This is a real deal.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And with all this pressure, right, all this uncertainty, especially for those of us who, we've been at this for a while,
Right.
it's easy to get stuck in that cycle of self-doubt. Like,
So where do we go from here?
right.
Knowing all of this, like, this is so common, it's so sneaky. How do we even begin to, like, tackle this?
Well, the good news is this article doesn't just leave us hanging with a problem.
Okay.
It actually digs into some solutions. And the first one might seem counterintuitive.
Okay.
It might almost seem like admitting defeat, but it's really about shifting the narrative.
I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So it starts with simply acknowledging,
Okay.
accepting
Yeah.
that these feelings are normal. You're not weak, you're not a failure, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And the article even calls out that there are some pretty high-profile individuals who've talked about their own struggles with imposter syndrome.
Really? Like, who? Give me some names, because that always helps. Be like, okay, it's not just me.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, if they feel it, maybe I'm
Yeah.
allowed to feel it too.
Right.
They specifically mention Sheryl Sandberg,
Wow.
COO of Facebook.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about successful.
Right.
And even she has been candid about, grappling with these feelings.
No. Yeah.
And so it really throws a wrench in the idea that, oh, if I'm at a certain level,
Right. You should just have it all figured out.
I should have it all figured out.
Yeah.
But that's not the case.
So step one, we normalize it. We accept it's part of the human experience, even for us seasoned pros. But how do we actually start to, like, quiet that inner critic?
Well, the article suggests getting proactive.
Okay.
And it talks about this idea of keeping a brag file.
A brag file. Okay, I already love this. Tell me more.
Right. It's brilliant because it's really about actively combating those negative thoughts with concrete evidence of your accomplishments.
Okay.
So think of it as like a curated collection of your wins,
Okay.
projects you've crushed, amazing feedback you've received, even just journaling about challenges you've overcome.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so that when those imposter voices get really loud,
Yeah.
you have this arsenal of evidence to remind yourself, wait a minute, I've got this.
It's like a reality check for your brain.
Exactly.
Because we get so caught up in the day-to-day, we're focused on what's next, and you kind of forget about all these amazing things that you've already done.
Right, and it's not about being arrogant.
Right.
It's not about, being boastful.
Right.
It's just about having that concrete evidence
Right.
to counter those insidious thoughts that whisper, you're not good enough. They're going to find you out.
They're going to find you out. And I think as an experienced professional, that's especially crucial because you have years of projects, collaborations, successes.
Right.
That's a lot of ammo for the brag file.
Yes. And it's not just about individual reflection either.
Right.
The article goes on to emphasize the power of connection,
Okay.
especially in a world that often feels isolating,
Yeah, totally.
even at the top. Right.
Even when you're surrounded by people.
Right.
You're leading a team, you can still feel like an imposter.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so they highlight two key groups, peers and mentors.
Okay.
And remember that study from psychological science
Yeah.
about how powerful peer support can be in reducing stress.
Right.
Same principle here.
Totally.
Talking to people who are in the trenches with you,
Yes.
facing similar challenges,
Yeah.
it's incredibly validating.
It's that misery loves company thing, but in a good way.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, thank God it's not just me.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the power of mentorship, which is something I'm personally really passionate about.
Me too. Especially for, like, us veterans, you know what I mean? To have someone who's been there, who gets it,
Right. They get the specific pressures and anxieties that come with the territory.
Yes, absolutely. To have that person in your corner is invaluable.
It's huge. And what they point out is that mentors, they don't just offer guidance and advice. They can often see our strengths more clearly than we can see them ourselves.
Oh, that's so true.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
They can remind us of our accomplishments,
Yeah.
our resilience, those times we doubted ourselves but pushed through anyway.
Totally.
It's about having someone in your corner who can, call you out on your own BS in a supportive way, of course, but
Right, and celebrate the wins, even the little ones.
yes.
Which I think makes such a difference. But this is interesting, though, because the article doesn't just stop at, like, the personal strategies.
Right.
It talks about what companies can do,
Yes.
which I thought was super insightful.
I agree. It's not just on us to figure it out on our own.
Right.
Organizations have a huge role to play in creating a culture where people feel safe to say, I don't know.
Yes.
I don't have all the answers.
100%. And I think so often, especially the higher up you go, there's this, like, unspoken pressure
Right.
to have it all together, to be the expert, to never show weakness. But imagine if leaders were just more open about their own struggles.
Right. Imagine if a CEO can get up and say, yeah, you know what? I feel like an imposter sometimes too.
Totally.
It's just that vulnerability is so powerful.
It changes everything.
It does.
Because then it allows everyone else to be like, oh, me too.
Exactly.
And not feel the judgment.
Exactly. And it paves the way for more supportive practices.
Totally.
They talk about the importance of investing in employee growth
Mm-hmm.
and development, not as a box to tick, but as a core value.
Right. Like, it's part of your culture.
Exactly.
And it's like, remember that stat from LinkedIn Learning?
Yes.
94% of employees said that they would stay longer at a company if they invested in their learning.
Wow, that's huge.
Which I think is directly tied to this.
Right.
Because when you feel supported in your growth, when you feel like you're constantly learning, you're evolving, it's a lot harder to feel inadequate.
Right.
Because you're like, well, I'm working on it, you know?
Right, exactly.
I'm a work in progress.
Exactly.
But I'm going somewhere.
Right.
And then there's the simple, but often overlooked, celebrating the wins,
Yes.
both big and small, you know?
Recognize it, appreciate it.
Yes.
It goes a long way.
To counteract those feelings of not good enough. It really does. It's all about creating that culture of support where people feel seen, valued, empowered to grow.
100%. Yeah.
You know, and just, I have to say, just even reading this article, talking through it with you, this is a lot to unpack.
It is.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have, but I think what's really key here is that imposter syndrome, even for those of us with years of experience, it doesn't have to hold us back.
Right.
There are practical things that we can do individually and collectively
Yes.
to manage these feelings.
Yeah.
And even potentially turn them into a force for good.
Ooh, I like that. A force for good.
Right.
There was one point in the article, though, at the very end, the final thought that really stuck with me. So what was it? What really got you thinking?
Well, the article ends with this question, and it's really stuck with me.
Okay.
It's like, what if we've been looking at imposter syndrome all wrong?
Okay.
What if instead of this flaw,
Yeah.
this thing to overcome, what if it's actually a sign of something positive?
Interesting, because I feel like we always treat it as this thing to, like, squash, like a bad habit.
Yeah.
But what if it's not?
What if those feelings of not being good enough are actually the thing that push us to become better?
Yeah.
What if that nagging doubt is the thing that drives us to constantly learn, grow, reach for more?
So instead of, like, fearing it, you should lean into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, that's a signal you're on the right track. You're pushing yourself.
Yeah, you're outside your comfort zone.
Even if it's a little uncomfortable.
Exactly. And think about it, going back to, the theme of this deep dive, experienced professionals.
Right.
Who's more likely to experience imposter syndrome?
Mm.
Someone who is complacent, coasting on their, past successes.
Right.
Or someone who is ambitious, driven, always striving to reach that next level.
It's true. When you put it that way, it's almost like those feelings of being an imposter are a side effect of ambition.
Maybe.
It's not that you're not good enough, it's that you're pushing yourself to be better.
Exactly. And that's a really empowering way, I think, to reframe this whole conversation. It's not about eradicating those feelings completely. It's about understanding where they come from.
Yeah.
And using them as fuel to keep growing.
I love that. I love that. It's like turning the tables on imposter syndrome. You're not defeated by it, you're driven by it.
Exactly.
So to everyone listening, especially our, more experienced folks out there, if you're feeling that familiar pang of self-doubt, just remember, you're not alone.
You're in good company.
You're in good company, and more importantly, maybe that feeling is a sign that you're on the verge of something amazing.
Yes.
Who knows, maybe the next challenge, the one that makes you feel like the biggest imposter in the room, that's the one that leads to your greatest accomplishment.
Wouldn't that be something?
It really would. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. Until next time.